Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator Cooper. Senator Scott Motley.
Thank you, Mr. President. You're just trying to disarm me, right? You're always doing that. Mr. President, I think there's a very good reason why we have taken so long to really embrace casino gambling. I have been hearing this discussion and listening to it for decades, including hearing the results of numerous reports which have been done. Jamaica is ambivalent about casino. There are no two ways about it. And what we have seen evolve is a kind of creeping gambling system where you start with a slot machine, then you go a little bit further and you have a casino here and a casino there, which interestingly, as far as I am aware, and the minister can tell me if I'm wrong, has no restrictions on the vulnerable going. I don't know who you call the vulnerable, by the way. I don't know if the elderly is in the vulnerable, because then I would have to consider the fact that my 97-year-old mother is only happy when she goes to the casino. So I don't know what you describe as a vulnerable person. I also don't know how responsible and gaming can be used in the same sentence. That sounds to me like a bit of an oxymoron. The fact of the matter is that unless we are very clear and upfront, confront some of the issues which have delayed this piece of regulations, unless we confront them and we realize the harm and the damage which they do to our society, then all these regulations referenced will be of naught. Because it is easy to pass laws. It is just very challenging to implement them, and more importantly, to monitor them. The government will be facing this challenge with the extent of the casino gambling. Because when you now put in place the possibility for these large-scale casinos in what we call the integrated resorts, you're also going to encourage others which do not fall under this regime popping up. Now let me say this. So you're giving how many licenses? 3? No. You have a maximum. You have to have a certain amount of money in order to invest in a casino. There's an element of exclusivity about who can get a casino license. In other words, it's something that captures the extremely wealthy investor. Because as you said, Minister Hill, you have to come with at least $1 billion US.
No, you haven't reduced it.
At least. Or they have reduced it?
Reduce it, no.
I'm sorry, I missed that reduction.
Yeah.
Senator Benny Cooper, you have articulated the how for the people. I've heard it before. I've heard it many times of how the people will benefit. It does not link back to the demonstrations that I saw for the first time within the hotel industry, when workers walked through the lobby and actually went out and demonstrated for better pay because they were finding that services were undervalued and that, in fact, those who benefited and benefited extremely well were not from their rank.
They get out cover union.
That the ordinary person felt exploited
They get out cover
and unrewarded,
And then-
while those who made the money repatriated it elsewhere. So I really wish that we will find the occasion when outside of the spotlight of cameras, we can really trace what this will do for Jamaica. The how. How does it work? How is it perceived to benefit? How much revenue will remain here in Jamaica? What is the capacity for linkages? How will medium and small size businesses benefit? Will they benefit? Are there considerations which have been expressed by these large investors that they have to be able to bring in luxury items without paying taxes? Is it that they have consideration of bringing in a certain level of workers? I want to know the how. And listening to everybody over there, I have still not felt the how it is going to work. Now, this is why I was supposed to speak last, and this is why I asked Senator Small Ferguson to just allow me to speak, because might be the next speaker will give me not a prepared text, but will respond to the concerns which I'm articulating, because they are real concerns. You see, from where I am looking at it, gambling is an addiction. It is an addiction, and you could legislate from here until eternity. You can't legislate. My mother, Senator Hill, my mother, who is a decent, well-brought up principal of school all her life, a model of virtuous woman, became a gambler in her later years. No, no, I am not joking. Listen, for you, this is talking about something on paper. For me, it is a lived reality, because she used to read a lot, without glasses, by the way. I hope I take after her, because she doesn't look any close to. She looks like somebody in her 70s. But the one thing now that makes her happy, going to the casino. Eh? And everybody says to me, why are you making it bother you? You should be glad she can go casino. She's not in a nursing home. She's not in a wheelchair. So the morals which she imposed on me have apparently remained with me, whereas she has decided to abandon it. But so let us say this. There is no question that gambling is a moneymaker.
Except Trump. Yeah, but Trump match it up.
A projection of 624 billion US by 2031 is not a small matter. It is an enterprise which is built on capitalizing people's weaknesses. It is an enterprise which is built on capitalizing on addiction. Now, let me make it clear. I understand the need for the government to have a driver of the economy. I don't think this is the right one. But I understand how, when a government is confronted with certain challenges, they have to try and find a balance. So I'm understanding why you're doing it. But I'm saying that I have not heard that sufficient thought has been given to the consequences of doing it. Because you cannot write down on paper that you will be protecting the mental health of somebody.
People can't walk off of the road.
You cannot actually have accountability at the level of your regulations. If that were so, we would have a perfect world. Because all we would have to do is write it down. Now, I looked up, Minister, your Rise Life. It was Rise Life.
Rise Life is another place.
And
That deals with the dead.
I suppose that organizations,
Rise Life. Yeah. Rise Life. Rise Life.
commendable. I know some of the directors. I will have the opportunity to speak with them and to share my own thoughts with them as to how they can strengthen and expand. You're going to need to have many more such kind of initiatives. You're going to have to strengthen your suicide prevention lines, for example. Because when people find that they lose their monies in gambling, it can have a serious effect. I don't know what restrictions you have to put in place. You say people under 18 can't go. Is that an appropriate age limit for you to have? In this instance, should you be thinking of a higher age limit? Because you really have to have some level of protection. Have you fully considered your vulnerable population? There are some details that I think maybe you have it, but I don't sense it. I don't sense it. I don't get the feeling after this debate that I can be fairly comfortable with it. So, and you come over here and direct how this part of the house gets run? Okay. So, as I said, in your attempt to diversify the tourism project, are you actually concentrating wealth amongst a few? In limiting access, are you giving only certain privileged persons an opportunity? You know, Minister, I can't help but hear you. I remember when we were discussing the access tax, you were talking about your government can't just look at protecting one aspect of a society. You can't single out an aspect of a society so now you can tell me when you respond exactly how it is that you see this as benefiting the population and how you have weighed the harms to the population against the benefit to the population. I also, now with this new, with these regulations in place, Minister, how do they apply to the other casinos which are already in existence? Do they apply at all, or is it just only confined to these three that we're going to have at integrated resorts? Will there be any sort of attempt to protect the vulnerable who go to casinos, or to implement age limits or anything like that? I want to know if it's a general approach which is going to be taken to the industry, or it is only going to be confined to these $3 billion entities. I want to know if it is now part of government's policy to identify the harm of gambling and put in place measures to address it, or it's just restricted to these three? I guess all my friends who buy cash pot must be listening to me now and wondering where I'm going with this. Because Mr. President, there are people who call you and say, "What you dream last night?" You're a dreamer. What you dream last night? Me need to go buy a cash pot. But on a very serious note, I have some concerns. I have some concerns. And, I find that when I listen to some of the debates, that I believe, I've come to believe that the presentations signify an achievement. It's like, we've done this. We did this. And it's almost as though that congratulatory message makes it all different. You know what I mean, Senator Sinclair? In other words, we have done this. We did it. It was us. But that's what is the driver. And I really just want to be assured that there are some considerations which are being given to the damage which can be done to the psyche of the nation. And remind you, Senator Thompson, that the morality of a country is what distinguishes it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Scott Motley. Leader Johnson Smith and Scott Motley, we have been taking a break at 1:30. I'm going to ask that you give me two speakers that will take us up to 1:30. I know that Senator Sinclair. No, I'm not going to permit him to go until 3 o'clock. Yes, one each. Yeah, to take us to 1:30. And then we'll resume. What we have been doing is breaking at 1:15 and resuming at 2:15. Pardon? 1:30 and then resuming at 2:15. Senator Sinclair.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President.
1 minute. Senator Sinclair.
Yes.